The chamber was built to inspire fear. Polished obsidian walls stretched upward into a ceiling webbed with veins of cold light, humming with alien energy. Rows of creatures filled the gallery, tall, thin figures with iridescent skin, ridges along their brows, and eyes that burned like chips of molten metal. The air tasted metallic, sharp as blood on the tongue, and the silence carried a weight more suffocating than chains. At the chamber's center stood a platform, circular and gleaming, its surface laced with embedded restraints that shimmered faintly blue. Upon it lay the girl, human, frail-looking compared to the towering guards around her, wrists bound, ankles clamped, head tilted slightly toward the ceiling as if searching for some constellation she knew was not there. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, deliberate breaths, and though her skin was marked with bruises and dried blood, her lips curved upward in a smile that should not have belonged in this place. The alien king, enthroned at the far end, leaned forward with thin-lipped disdain. His crown was little more than a jagged circlet of bone and steel fused into his brow, but his presence carried the authority of a predator confident of dominance. His voice, deep and resonant, vibrated the walls. "So this is the human who dared defy my fleet? This is the creature your kind sent as messenger." The girl's eyes flicked to him, calm, strangely amused. "Messenger's one word for it. Volunteer is another." She coughed softly, then added, "You have a lovely place. Very homey. Missing a few plants, though. Ever heard of ferns?" The gallery murmured, a ripple of confusion moving through the ranks. The king's jaw tightened. He gestured, and the torturer stepped forward. A massive alien with 6 arms, each tipped with delicate instruments that glimmered under the chamber's sterile light. Hooks, needles, conduits, tools designed not only to wound, but to study. The torturer's voice rasped like stone dragged across iron. "Human, your species has resisted assimilation. You will give us codes, bases, your defenses. Or you will scream until silence consumes you." The girl tilted her head, her hair, matted with sweat and dust, falling into her eyes. "Funny thing about humans," she said, her voice steady despite the restraint pressing into her ribs. "We tend to get chatty at dinner parties. But torture? That's just boring." The instruments descended. A probe pressed against her ribs, sending currents racing through her nervous system. Her body arched, tendons straining, and a gasp broke from her lips. Yet when her eyes snapped open again, the smile had returned, faint but unmistakable. "Ah," she whispered hoarsely. "Now it feels like rush hour traffic. You've nailed the vibe." The gallery laughed cruelly. The king watched, lips curling upward. But beneath the laughter lingered something else, a hesitation, a faint unease. The human should have broken already. Another device plunged into her temple, flooding her mind with invasive pulses. Memories flickered on the holographic screen above her platform. Childhood images of green fields, laughter, rain against windows. The aliens leaned forward, eager to harvest secrets. Yet as the waves deepened, the visions changed, scenes of battlefields, fire, human soldiers locked arm in arm, the sound of drums, and war cries older than civilization itself. The girl's voice cut through, trembling but unyielding. "Careful. Go too deep, you'll meet my grandmother. She doesn't take kindly to strangers." The torturer recoiled slightly, unsettled. The probe withdrew, dripping with her blood. The king barked, "Continue." Hours seemed to pass in minutes. Her body bore the marks of precision cruelty, burns along her arms, fractures in her ribs, cuts stitched not to heal, but to prolong. Yet every time they paused, waiting for her to collapse into despair, she opened her eyes, looked straight at them, and offered some fragment of humor. "Is this the part where you offer me a drink?" she asked once, lips cracked and dry. When seared with a plasma brand, she hissed, then muttered, "Now that's what I call a tan line." And when her heart rate spiked dangerously high, monitors screaming, she croaked, "Don't worry. Happens every time I watch baseball." The gallery grew quieter with each remark. What began as amusement shifted into unease, then into a silence heavy enough to press against the chest. Even the guards, disciplined and unyielding, exchanged glances. Finally, her body could endure no more. A final surge of current snapped through her, and she convulsed violently, eyes rolling back, chest seizing. The restraints bit into her wrists as her heart monitors shrieked and then flatlined into a long, merciless tone. Her head lolled to the side, lips frozen in that same faint curve of a smile. The king rose, triumphant. So ends the myth of human defiance. Weak flesh, weak spirit, nothing more. His words carried across the chamber, echoed by roars of approval. Aliens stamped their limbs, voices swelling in grim satisfaction. Yet not all joined the chorus. In the shadows stood General Vanar, one of the few commanders who had faced human forces directly. His scarred mandibles clicked nervously, his throat emitting a low hum. He leaned toward Nade. She should not have smiled. Not at the end. Humans die many ways, but they do not die amused. Something is wrong. The aide dismissed him. She is gone. Let the king revel. Technicians approached, preparing to dispose of the body. Yet as they released the restraints, a soft alarm chimed. One of the monitors flickered, minor, almost invisible, a deviation in the cooling rate of her corpse. The technician frowned, tapped the device, and recalibrated. Still, the body temperature held steady, resisting the drop into true death. Another anomaly followed. Faint electrical activity in neural clusters long after cessation. The technician whispered, "Impossible." General Vanar's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward, observing. The faint smile remained on her lips, mocking the silence, taunting the certainty of the chamber. It was as if she knew something they did not, even beyond death's veil. The king waved it off. Faulty instruments. Dispose of the carcass. The torturer bent low, gathering his tools, but hesitated as his gaze brushed her face. For a moment, no more than a heartbeat, he thought he saw her eyes flicker beneath the lids, like the twitch of a dreamer between worlds. He told himself it was nothing, a trick of exhaustion. Yet unease settled in the marrow of every alien present, though none dared voice it aloud. The gallery slowly emptied, laughter fading into distant corridors. Only the faint hum of machines remained, punctuated by the steady drone of the cooling chamber. The girl's body lay still, hair fanned across the platform, bruises stark against pale skin. But her lips, frozen in that impossible smile, seemed less like a remnant of defiance, and more like a promise. Minutes passed, heavy and inexorable. 17 of them, marked by the quiet ticking of alien chronometers. And in the 17th minute, a spark whispered through the wires, a tremor rippled across the monitors, and her chest rose, once sharply, as though breath itself had returned to claim her. Her fingers twitched. Her eyes fluttered. The smile widened just enough to make the shadows tremble. The chamber should have remained silent. The instruments were meant to ensure finality, to erase any doubt. Yet the silence broke when the girl's chest lifted with a ragged inhale, sharp as a blade tearing through canvas. The sound was small, human, fragile, but in the alien hall, it thundered louder than cannon fire. The technician monitoring her body stumbled backward, his limbs clattering against the floor. His voice cracked as he whispered into the calm, She breathes." The words spread like a contagion. Guards stiffened, mandibles twitched, ridges along their skulls flared in instinctive alarm. Across the gallery, the remaining attendants froze, their gazes snapping to the platform. And there she was, still broken, still bloodied, yet undeniably alive. Her eyelids trembled, then opened. The eyes that stared back at them glowed faintly, not with artificial light, but with something deeper, something human and unexplainable. She exhaled, slow and steady, then sat up with the weary ease of someone stretching after a nap. The restraints, once rigid, cracked and fell away as though ashamed of their purpose. She brushed her hair back from her face, smearing dried blood across her temple, and glanced around at the wide-eyed gathering. 17 minutes, she murmured softly, almost to herself. Not bad. I was betting 20. The silence fractured into chaos. Weapons hissed, guards raised blasters, and the chamber's alarms wailed with mechanical panic. The king, once composed and regal, lurched to his feet. "Contain her," he roared, his voice rattling with something he had not felt in centuries: fear. Blaster fire erupted in a staccato storm. Beams of searing plasma tore through the air, streaks of emerald and gold against the black walls. The girl did not run. She did not cower. She merely tilted her head, eyes narrowing with uncanny calculation. Then she moved. To the watching aliens, her movement was incomprehensible. One moment she sat on the platform. The next she blurred, weaving between shots with the effortless grace of water slipping through fingers. Bolts that should have burned through her instead scorched empty air, ricocheting harmlessly. She stepped past a guard, plucked the weapon from his claws with casual precision, and spun it into another's chest. The blast hurled him backward, armor smoking. Her lips twitched upward again. "You're aiming too high," she said, voice calm, conversational. "Little secret, humans crouch." The guards faltered. Fear spread like cracks in glass. These were soldiers bred for dominance, conditioned never to flinch. But the sight of a corpse walking, smiling, and dismantling their brethren unraveled training older than empires. She darted through them, each movement precise, not wasted. A kick to the knee sent one alien sprawling. A twist to the wrist disarmed another. She was not a brawler. She was a tactician, her every strike a lesson in efficiency. The chamber that had been a theater for her suffering became her stage, and her audience trembled at the performance. The king slammed his claws against the throne's armrest, snarling. Impossible. She was dead. General Vaynar, still lingering near the shadows, whispered, "I warned you. Humans don't die properly." One soldier managed to corner her, raising a double-barreled staff charged with lethal voltage. She regarded it with a raised brow, then sidestepped as it came crashing down. The staff buried itself into the platform, sparks leaping in violent arcs. She leaned in close to the soldier, her breath hot against his ear. "Nice toy. Shame you don't know how to use it." With a swift motion, she wrenched the staff free and drove its charge into his chest. The scream that followed silenced the gallery more effectively than any order. Between skirmishes, she hummed softly. The tune was old, simple, distinctly human. A lullaby, maybe, or the opening bars of some forgotten Earth song. The absurdity of it made the alien spines crawl. How could something so gentle thread its way through carnage? The king's advisors chattered frantically, their voices high-pitched with panic. Extermination protocol. Burn the chamber. Burn her. No, the king snapped, though his voice trembled. His pride warred with his terror. "I will not have my hall reduced to ash by one fragile creature." The girl looked up at him then, eyes locking with his across the smoke and ruin. For a heartbeat, time seemed to still. She raised her blood-stained fingers, gave a polite little wave, and said, "Hi. You must be the one in charge. I've got some notes." The words hit harder than the plasma fire. The king recoiled, his crown glinting under the cold lights. No one addressed him so casually, let alone with the tone of a dinner guest commenting on table manners. Yet here she was smiling, unbroken, her humor cutting sharper than blades. Reports spread beyond the chamber. The Empire's comm channels buzzed with frantic transmissions. A human has risen from death. A human cannot be killed. Fleets paused mid-maneuver. Officers whispered rumors, and soldiers who had never seen Earth trembled at its name. One advisor slammed his claws on the console. "This footage, stop it from leaving this hall." But it was too late. Someone, whether by accident or intention, had already leaked the live feed. Across the Empire, alien citizens watched a human girl laugh in the face of their king's army. Some dismissed it as fabrication. Others, watching her dismantle a guard battalion with a smile, felt the first prickles of dread. Back in the chamber, her movements slowed. Not from weakness, but from choice. She leaned against a pillar, wiping blood from her brow with the back of her hand. 17 minutes, she repeated softly. That's how long you had to celebrate. She glanced at the guards who still stood, their weapons trembling. Make the most of your next 17. Might be your last. One guard broke ranks and fled. Another dropped his weapon, backing away. The king's roar shook the chamber. Cowards. Face her. But his command carried less weight now, the foundation of fear cracking beneath the weight of a greater one. The girl stepped forward, closer to the throne. Each footfall echoed, slow, deliberate, carrying the gravity of inevitability. Her eyes held no malice, no overt rage. Only calm, measured purpose, the kind that terrified more than fury ever could. She stopped at the base of the throne steps, her gaze steady on the king. You wanted information, codes, secrets. Her smile sharpened, humor laced with venom. Let me give you one. You picked the wrong human. The king's claws tightened around his scepter. For the first time in centuries, his voice faltered. What are you? She tilted her head, considering. Dead. Alive. Take your pick. Either way, her smile widened, and her voice dropped into something colder than ice. I'm your problem now. The chamber lights flickered, systems destabilizing as though in answer. Somewhere deep within the palace, power grids faltered, doors sealed, alarms wailed. It was not random failure, it was sabotage, precise and timed. The girl's resurrection was not an accident. It was part of something larger, something carefully planned. General Vaynar's mandibles clicked as realization struck him. He whispered to himself. She wanted to be captured. The girl's eyes flashed briefly, almost acknowledging him, though she had not heard. She placed her hand on the bottom step of the throne, leaving a smear of human blood across alien steel. Then she leaned forward, voice soft but carrying to every corner. Tell your empire this. 17 minutes after you kill a human, we start keeping score. The weight of her words hung heavy, denser than any weapon. Even the king, towering and adorned, shrank into his throne, his authority eclipsed by the smile of the one he thought broken. The alarms grew louder, the chamber lights dimming to crimson. Somewhere in the distance, explosions rumbled, shaking the foundations. Fleets scrambled, empire-wide communications choked with overlapping distress signals. Yet in the center of the storm stood the girl, steady and unyielding, her eyes locked on her prey. And then she whispered something too soft for most to hear, but clear enough for the king, close enough for General Vaynar, chilling enough to etch itself into memory. This was just rehearsal. The empire had always prided itself on control. Systems obeyed, citizens feared, enemies bent or broke. But now, with each passing second, control slipped through its claws. The alarms in the throne chamber did not fade. They multiplied, overlapping, feeding reports of fire in the lower hangars, sabotage in the command decks, weapon vaults detonating from within. What should have been an isolated disturbance spread outward like ink and water, unstoppable, irreducible. And at the center of it all, the girl stood smiling. The king clutched his scepter tighter, his composure thinning. What trick is this? He demanded. His voice tried to thunder, but cracked against the edges, betraying him. She brushed a streak of blood from her lip with the back of her hand. Not a trick, a plan. You tortured me for 17 minutes, while my people wrote themselves into your systems. That's 17 minutes longer than we needed. The words dropped into the chamber like stones into a still pond. Ripples spread across every listening ear. General Vaynar stiffened, his scarred frame vibrating with a truth he had suspected but never dared name. Impossible, one advisor stammered, claws twitching across a control panel. No human technology could penetrate our encryption. The girl's gaze flicked toward him. You mean the encryption you stole from another species 3 centuries ago? Cute trick. Shame we cracked it while you were still bragging about it. She straightened, voice calm but threaded with quiet authority. We don't invent weapons to brag. We invent them to win. Her words carried the kind of certainty no blaster could extinguish. The king barked for his soldiers, but those who still held their weapons hesitated. The footage of her resurrection had already spread empire-wide, and hesitation was a virus deadlier than any plasma bolt. The girl stepped toward the nearest console, her bare feet silent against the obsidian floor. She tapped a few keys, as if she'd been trained in their systems all her life. Immediately, the chamber lights dimmed further, replaced by a holographic projection above the throne. It wasn't alien code. It wasn't the Empire's crest. It was the shape of Earth, its oceans glimmering, its continents sharp and defiant against the stars. A collective hiss rippled through the gallery. To project such an image within the heart of the Empire's palace was sacrilege. Humans are primitive, one advisor shouted desperately. You're nothing but a short-lived species clawing at the dirt of one insignificant world. The girl tilted her head, eyes glinting. Funny. That insignificant world just broke into your palace, hijacked your broadcasts, and scared your entire fleet into second-guessing itself. Doesn't feel insignificant from where I'm standing. Her humor was not cruel, but it cut deep all the same. The king's claws dug into the throne's armrests until sparks showered. You dare mock us? She raised a brow. You tortured me, killed me, and expected me to stay dead. I'd say I've earned the right to mock. The chamber shook again, this time from a deeper rumble. Through the high windows of the palace, faint glimmers of light flickered in orbit. The fleet was moving, but not in order. Ships collided, systems malfunctioned. Fireballs bloomed silently against the void. The girl turned her gaze upward, her tone almost conversational. That'll be the power relays we slipped into your docking stations. Took us about 6 months to plant them. We figured you'd never notice. Turns out we were right. For a moment, the aliens simply stared. The Empire's might, thought eternal, was unraveling in real time. All because of a species they had dismissed as weak, laughable, beneath contempt. General Vaynar's voice rasped low, carrying an edge of awe. You let yourself be captured. The girl's eyes met his. She didn't answer directly, but her smile was enough. The king snarled, rising from his throne. His towering figure loomed, ridged crown scraping the low arc of the ceiling light. This ends now. His scepter pulsed with raw energy, a weapon capable of incinerating armies. He leveled it at her, fury and fear warring in his molten gaze. She didn't flinch. Instead, she folded her arms, bloodied and bruised but steady. Go ahead. Kill me again. I'll be back in 17 minutes. Maybe less this time. The gallery fell utterly silent. Even the alarms seemed to mute themselves in that instant. Her voice had not risen, had not shouted, yet it filled every corner with the weight of inevitability. She took another step forward, and the projection of Earth expanded behind her, casting the chamber in soft blue light. You wanted to see what humanity really is? You thought you'd measure our pain, break our will, and brag about it at your councils. But you never understood what makes us dangerous. Her eyes, glimmering now with something fiercer than glow or fire, locked on the king. We plan, we endure, and we never fight fair. Outside, more explosions punctuated her words, the Empire's grand fleet burning piece by piece. Advisors clutched at consoles, desperate for control, but every command they sent returned only static. The sabotage was complete, total, and merciless. The girl lowered her voice, almost tender, as though explaining to a child. Do you know what the first lesson in human war is? Never give your enemy time to think. The second. Her smile sharpened. Always make them underestimate you. Works every time. Her humor struck like a knife, cloaked in charm, but laced with poison. The aliens saw it now. What they had mistaken for fragility was something far worse. Calculation. Humans were not unpredictable savages. They were predators who had perfected the art of pretending not to be. General Vaynar took a step forward, breaking the paralysis of the others. His voice was hoarse, almost reverent. What do you want? The girl looked at him, then at the king, then at the gallery of alien officials who had laughed at her suffering. Her voice hardened. I want you to remember this moment every time you think of Earth. I want your children to whisper about it, your scholars to tremble when they write about it. I want you to understand that humanity does not kneel. She paused, her smile curling with lethal grace. And then I want your empire to burn. The words ignited the room like oil on flame. The king screamed for his guards to advance, but they hesitated, caught between orders and survival. She seized the moment, launching forward with precision. In a blur, she disarmed the nearest soldier, spun his weapon into another's chest, and used the recoil to vault upward. Plasma bolts chased her, But she moved like she had mapped the battlefield before the fight began. Every dodge, every strike, every turn was calculated to unmake them. The throne chamber descended into chaos once more. Advisors fled, soldiers fell, and through it all she remained steady, her humor never far behind. When one soldier's blaster overheated and exploded, she quipped, "You should really get that checked, bad for the warranty." When another lunged at her with a blade, she sidestepped and muttered, "Nice form. Try again in a few million years." And then she was before the throne again, standing at the base of its steps. The king towered above, his scepter blazing with unstable energy, his chest heaving. For the first time, the gallery could see it. He was not untouchable. He was afraid. She climbed one step, then another, slow and deliberate. "You wanted to know what I am," she said softly, her voice carrying like steel dragged across stone. "You wanted to measure me, to catalog me, to dissect me." She reached the final step, standing eye level with him now. Her eyes narrowed, her voice dropping into a whisper meant for him alone. "But you never realized I was measuring you." The king's grip faltered on the scepter. Around them, the chamber shook with distant detonations as the empire's infrastructure collapsed. The girl leaned closer, her words precise as a scalpel. "Every question you asked, every device you used, every sneer you threw at me, I was studying you." And now, her smile was sharper than any blade. "I know exactly how to kill you." The chamber's lights flickered once more, plunging the room into crimson shadow. Outside, a fireball bloomed across the skyline, the capital city itself beginning to burn. The empire's control, once unquestioned, cracked irreparably in that moment. And the girl, standing in the heart of their power, bloodied yet smiling, whispered one last promise into the king's ear, just loud enough for the trembling gallery to hear. "This was never about me surviving you. It was about you surviving me." The throne chamber shook as if the empire itself were groaning under the weight of collapse. Dust drifted from the high arches, and the once gleaming obsidian walls trembled with each explosion rippling through the capital. Outside, the night sky burned. Warships spiraled into the atmosphere like meteors, fragments raining down in streaks of fire that lit the horizon. The empire's grandeur, once thought eternal, cracked apart with every heartbeat. At the center of it all stood the girl. Her bare feet were slick with her own blood and that of her enemies, yet she looked steady, unbent, her posture almost casual. The throne loomed above, and the king stood upon it like a cornered beast, his scepter glowing with unstable energy, his ridged crown shimmering with sweat. "You cannot end us," he spat, though his voice shook. "We have ruled stars before your kind crawled for mud. We will rule long after your ashes scatter." She tilted her head, studying him as though weighing his words like a schoolteacher correcting a child. "You've ruled, sure. But ruling is easy when nobody fights back. Surviving us." Her lips curved into that same quiet smile that had haunted them since her resurrection. "That's impossible." He raised the scepter, energy crackling in bolts that split the chamber floor. A roar of raw power surged as he swung it down toward her, intent to obliterate her completely this time. She didn't flinch. At the last moment, she stepped into the arc, too close for the strike to unleash its full force. Her hand caught the shaft, searing her palm, but she wrenched it downward with a scream of effort. The weapon buckled, its glow flickering wildly. The impact sent them both staggering. His size and strength dwarfed hers, but she moved with precision, slipping past brute force to strike where it hurt. Her elbow slammed into the ridges of his throat. Her knee cracked against the joint of his leg. He bellowed, swinging wildly, but she was already behind him, yanking the scepter free. The chamber lit with arcs of unstable fire as she held it aloft, its power now trembling in her grip. He spun toward her, fury blazing. "You dare touch what belongs only to kings." She leveled the weapon at him, her hands shaking from the force barely contained within. "Funny. Back on Earth we have this saying, 'Heavy is the head that wears the crown.' You look like your head could use a break." She swung the scepter. A torrent of energy burst outward, a concussive wave that hurled him backward into the throne. The obsidian cracked under the impact, shards raining down as he crumpled against the seat meant for rulers. Smoke rose from his armor, his breath ragged. But he wasn't finished. With a guttural snarl, he pushed himself upright, his body scorched, but his eyes burning brighter. He lunged, claws raking across her shoulder, tearing flesh. Pain lanced through her, hot and sharp, yet her grin only widened. Blood streamed freely, but she leaned close, whispering into the space between them. "That all you've got? My little brother hit harder than that when I stole his fries." The absurdity unsettled him more than the wound weakened her. His strikes grew erratic, desperate, fueled less by power than by the dawning realization that fear was creeping into his bones. She met each blow with counters, each lunge with precision. Her body bore punishment, but her will never faltered. Every strike she endured seemed only to sharpen her. The chamber doors burst open, more soldiers flooding in, their weapons raised. For a moment, the tide threatened to overwhelm her. Then the lights overhead flickered, and new sounds filled the hall, footsteps, heavy and deliberate. Figures emerged from the smoke, humans, armored, armed, eyes blazing with the same fire as the girls. The Empire's greatest secret, hidden until now, unveiled itself. The girl didn't turn, didn't need to. She simply smirked. "Took you long enough." Her reinforcements spread out with military precision, their rifles and blades cutting through the alien ranks. Blaster fire turned the gallery into chaos. The advisors shrieked, fleeing into hidden corridors, only to be met by more humans already waiting. The Empire's last sanctuary had become its trap. The king's gaze darted around in disbelief. How are they here?" The girl pressed her hand against the wound on her shoulder, blood soaking her palm. Her eyes locked on him, steady. "Because you opened the door. You dragged me here, thinking I was prey. But I was the bait." The realization struck the chamber like thunder. The Empire had not captured her. They had been lured. Humanity had set the trap, every step calculated, every outcome foreseen. Her death, her resurrection, her defiance. All pieces in a game the aliens hadn't realized they were playing until it was too late. The king roared, lunging once more, but now desperation outweighed strength. She caught his wrist, twisting until bone cracked. His scream echoed across the chamber. With one final surge of effort, she forced him back into the throne, the scepter pressed to his chest. Energy flared, wild and uncontrollable, as though it knew the end had come. He spat, voice breaking. "If you kill me, you become me." Her smile faltered, just for an instant, replaced by something colder, more human. "No. If I kill you, I become free." She slammed the scepter down. The explosion ripped through the chamber, blinding light flooding every corner. When it cleared, the throne was nothing but rubble, and the king's body lay motionless beneath it, crown shattered into shards. His reign, his empire, ended not with triumph, but with the echo of human laughter. Silence followed, heavy and stunned. Then the girl staggered, breath ragged, her body trembling with exhaustion. Her soldiers gathered near, their eyes on her not as a weapon, but as something more. She had done what none thought possible, toppled the heart of an empire with nothing but will and wit. She raised her head, staring into the nearest broadcast console. The feed was still live, still carrying her image to every corner of alien space. She wiped blood from her mouth with the back of her hand and spoke, her voice hoarse yet steady. "You wanted to see humanity broken. Instead, you showed the galaxy what we are." She leaned closer, eyes blazing. "We don't start wars, but we finish them." Across the stars, alien citizens watched. Some wept, some cursed, some simply stared in silence, as the myth of invincible empire shattered before their eyes. The girl let the silence stretch, then delivered her final words. 17 minutes after you killed me, I stood up. Now, 17 minutes after your king fell, so does your empire. Count carefully, because humanity always keeps score." The feed cut to static. Around her, the chamber burned, walls cracked and ceilings collapsing. Her soldiers urged her toward the exit, but she lingered for a moment, gazing at the ruin. There was no triumph in her eyes, only a weary satisfaction and the ghost of a smile. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Grandma was right. Never let the bullies think they've won." The ceiling groaned, dust raining down. She turned at last, limping toward the doors where her people waited. Each step echoed with finality, each breath proof that survival was not enough. It had to mean something. Behind her, the empire crumbled, its echoes fading into history. And as the smoke swallowed the chamber, one truth lingered sharper than all the rest. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Not ever again.